Well, I'm going to bring on Scott. Scott is a self-love coach. I find that he has such an amazing depth of awareness about self-love that he shares with me. And every single time I'm seeing new things when I hear him speak. It's just a gift to get to work with him. I'm super grateful. I actually met him at a retreat. And I feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world, really, because I randomly signed up to have roommates in an Airbnb, and Scott was one of them. And we had this incredible weekend where we just shared, we just connected, and we kept that going. And so we decided we really want to create something to be able to share it with other people. So welcome, Scott.
Well, thank you so much for your kind words. And of course, I echo that entirely because I find Rich to have an incredible awareness as well. And our and it's so interesting to get our two awarenesses in the same room because they have many overlaps and many, areas where we can add to each other's awareness. So it's just so fun. And one of the things I really so love about the whole self-love inquiry is how multi-layered it is. So I think two of the comments that were already made today to me show that in such a deep way. One, John's comment, I'm still thinking about because I think that is so illustrative that he said that there was this, thematic connection of all these past lives around not feeling worthy, not practicing self-love. And what I immediately think about this is that it's actually not so much about John, but about our culture at large and just the human predicament. Because in truth, almost all the lives getting lived on this planet as humans struggle with worthiness. And it's just such a common problem that we all face because we are, for so many reasons, conditioned and just the very package of the human being creates sort of a bias towards looking outward rather than inward. And that also goes to Jean's comment about coming to it at this point in her life being so meaningful for her because it's so hard to orient towards self-love. When you're young, it's especially hard because there are so many things grabbing our attention and distracting us to look outward, outward, outward. It's almost kind of interesting that we have to go through the whole arc of our life before we can relax enough to begin to dive inward. Now, of course, I'm not saying that's really the case. What would be really wonderful is if we could all start doing it immediately in life. And hopefully, through our discoveries today, we'll find more and more ways that will, encourage us to do that. But I just find it so interesting because I think we all should applaud ourselves that we're even addressing this topic. That's I guess, the most important thing that I want to say is congratulations that you are open to doing this because it's a really, really big deal.
Yeah. To your point that I feel like we're trained away, I also have this sense that we were born with this pure awareness of self-love, that we were born with this expressiveness, immediacy, and in asking for our needs, we would ask for what we needed. And we, of course, went through this cultural conditioning where we learned the language of violence and judgment, and we turned that against ourselves in a lot of ways. And so self-love is, in some ways, a very rebellious act. And I'm really echoing you here, Scott. I feel like in one of our podcasts you were talking about this. But it's this rebellious act of sovereignty, of of connecting with yourself. Scott and I were having a conversation to prepare for this, and I was describing how it's almost like you can complete this circuit, this inner circuit within yourself. And we're not usually able to do that. Usually it goes like it's incomplete, that there's this open circuit, and that has this feeling of incompleteness within us. And when we are able to really connect with ourselves, it completes the circuit and the energy of life can flow through us. We can both give and receive in a powerful way. And so Scott and I wanted to think about and have you kind of see where you are in relation to self-love. Because we're going to invite a commitment towards self-love. But before we do that, we want to know where you are right now. So if you would put in the chat a number from 1 through 10 about how committed am I to self-love? And it's okay if you're a 0. Or if you're a 10, that's amazing. Maybe you can share with us how you're doing this. That sounds awesome. You are very committed to yourself. But I would love for you to take a moment to tune in, put in the chat that number 1 through 10. If you'd like to add a little bit of words to tell us a little bit why that's the number that really came to your heart, that's where you are with your self-love. We'd like to see and kind of get a little bit of a poll. So go ahead and put that in the chat.
Can I throw a little metaphor out there
Yeah,
to
please.
help us arrive at our numbers? Because this is such a great question. And it's also one it's sometimes hard to take an accurate read of one's own self-love practice because of all the noise out in society that distracts us from even understanding what self-love is. So just really quick, I found this little exercise that I think is kind of fun. Imagine, if you will, that just somehow or another, a beautiful angelic child landed on your lap. Doesn't really matter what age or gender, whatever you feel is right, but this beautiful angelic child is sitting on your lap looking up at you with wide eyes. And it's experiencing some sort of discomfort. You can tell maybe it's crying, maybe some tears, whatever, but you can tell there's some discomfort going on in this beautiful angelic child. One way to frame the question is, it's so natural for us to completely be present to tend to a child in that circumstance, right? So the question is, how much difference would there be to the way you responded to provide, being present for that child's discomfort versus if you had the exact same discomfort inside you right now? How much of a gap, if any, is there? Because for most people, it's so easy to jump into tending to that child and much harder to tend to their own stuff, even if it's the exact same kind of issue. So that kind of puts it in relief. Does that make sense?
Yeah, are there any questions? So again, you're putting in the chat, what is your number? And that's okay if you're not sure. That might be where you're at right now. Awesome. Yeah, say I'm
Yeah, and that's the really interesting thing too, because you could answer it on an intellectual level of what you think you should be for yourself, or you can dig even deeper on the body, on the somatic level, how you really tend to yourself, which sometimes differs from how you feel that you should intellectually tend to yourself.
And I'll read some of these. So it's 7. I know self-love is important in my life, but it's hard because of past influences where self-love was seen as selfish. I love that because that's something that we're conditioned to try to avoid. Like we have this ego part that says, I can't be self-loving to myself. That would be very egoic and selfish. And then I'm a 7 in self-love. I'm working on catching my thoughts that are not about self-love. Often I scare myself with worst case scenarios. It's getting better though. First thing in the morning, I wake up and feel afraid. But then before I allow myself to remember what I'm afraid of, I comfort myself by reassuring myself that I God this. I really want to talk about that too. Do you mind if I kind of go on a little bit of a talk about that specific thing, Scott?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Well, one of the things that this was actually inspired by you, by the way, because in one of our last coaching sessions, Scott invited me to release other people in my life from having to meet my needs, from having to validate me, from having to meet any of my needs. And that is just this incredible freedom. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't go and connect with them, but I release them. I let them go. And so what I was thinking of recently was that what if I could do the same thing for myself? Because I was like, I have to meet my own needs. I have to take care of myself. If these other people aren't going to do it and then I release them, then it's all on me. But I thought, okay, what if that wasn't true? What if I could release myself? And the only way that I could do that is if something else could meet my needs, which what I would want to see is that the universe already meets my needs in so many incredible ways. And so my job no longer is to meet my own needs. My job is to cultivate an awareness of how my needs are already met and how I block myself from seeing that through judgment and through fear and through lack and need. And that is something that I'm going to be cultivating. I'm going to be exploring.
Yeah.
And thank you, Scott, for your inspiration around that.
Well, I love your addition because um, it's kind of giving me goosebumps because it takes it to a whole nother level. The releasing of yourself,
Mm.
as you mentioned, so profound because that involves now we are just trusting that we're okay, just as we are right now. And what's so interesting to me is that kind of embedded in that release, the way I'm seeing it anyway right now, is that if you can, because our mind wants to, categorize everything as whether it's a problem. Is this meeting my need? Is that meeting my need? Am I getting my needs met? There's this constant filtering going on. And then we see a problem. And when we see that problem, we're just sure that there's definitely no way we're going to get our needs met with that. But what's so interesting is that this release that you're suggesting allows us, if we're releasing every human being and we're releasing ourselves, when this supposed problem that we're perceiving comes up, we can flip it so much more easily in that space of release to see that it too is a gift, that the universe is meeting our needs always 24/7, even with what appears to be a problem, because there's so much growth there, you know? It's so liberating to do what you're suggesting that it's really pulling me over. I've never gone that far.
I'm not sure I have yet either. I'm just getting the inklings of it. And it was funny because yesterday I was just so ungrounded. I was telling you, Scott, that what was alive for me yesterday was I was having so much frustration and anger, and then I was able to really slow down and be kind to myself, which means for me means just tuning in to what I'm feeling. And that acceptance and that awareness, I think is the core of self-love. If we're going to orient towards self-love, I think it's just having that grace for ourselves, even when we're in the midst of challenge, upset, and we have done something we're not proud of, or we've acted out in certain ways. But really having that awareness, but not pushing it away,
Right.
not rejecting it, but instead feeling it directly and feeling it without the story that's just running around in our heads.
Right, right. And that reminds me of the comment that was made about how, so often people feel like perhaps self-love can be seen as selfish.
Mm.
It feels very related because I feel like, there is this view sometimes that society will impose on people who are wanting to practice self-love, that it's possibly indulgent or narcissistic or overly individualistic to pursue self-love. And all those, to me, really miss the point that you're making about the grace that you describe. Because it is a tremendous act of grace when you decide to turn towards self-love. And really, sometimes I like to simplify it because I do think it's helpful for us to really break down what actually is that moment when you decide you do want to orient towards self-love. What is that moment, you know? And I feel like one way of describing that moment is when you actually acknowledge that you are living inside yourself. Because all of society is constantly directing us outward. Our eyes are looking outward, and it's just so easy to think that we live in this outer world. And that's why I feel like once you start to understand, self-love is just actually based on recognizing that you do live in here. Once you start acknowledging that you're living in here, then this whole idea that it be selfish, how could it be selfish to acknowledge that I live in here? How could that be indulgent? That's just the reality is that I live in here. So since I live in here, it makes sense to tend to this inner space as a priority. And that's how I define self-love.
It very much reminds me of, uh, would you like to say something? You're muted. Here, I'll ask you to unmute.
Jean, oh, there you go. Did you unmute?
Yeah, I think we got it. Go
Um,
ahead, Jean.
well, as a 94-year-old person, I've lived a great deal of life, and I guess what comes to mind first of all is that at different periods, as we go through the life cycle, I think this inevitably changes. Or, I mean, that's really, I'd like to pose that as a question. As a mother, and during that period of time, I was definitely oriented towards looking to my children, being a good listener, no thought of the self-love stuff, not at all. It's very new for me. And yet I can see that even in that period of time, perhaps more particularly in that period of time, that this idea of self-love becomes important. But I guess it's going to take me a little while. I think I've always, I think of myself as wanting to be better at validating the other person. Scott will tell you, I think that's an important word for me. It has become more important at this time in life. So this idea of self-love, but here oriented and trying to look to the other and find ways to validate that person is sometimes somehow contrary to that. So I guess I'd like to know how people can do both.
See, this is a fantastic question because I think it goes to the very, very root of what self-love is and also why there's so much misunderstanding around it. Because, we were supposedly, launched at age 18 as adults. And then we're supposed to, meet people and have relationships to possibly get ready for marriage. And we haven't even learned who we are. And so it's no surprise that people have trouble with their relationships because they have no, foundation. You see, I guess the thing to answer your question more directly, let me come at it at a different angle. How can you really validate somebody else when you haven't validated yourself? How could you even do that, right? I mean, you could definitely go through the motion. You could definitely say some things, but would it really be received in a deep, profound way if it's coming from somebody who actually, hasn't found that love for themselves? That's a gap, and it also goes back to this question of selfishness, because you see, what I think is so often overlooked is until you are really loving yourself at a sufficient level, it's actually not even possible to love anybody else. It's simply not possible because you can't spread love to another person when there isn't that love within, right? It's like the sun can't shine on another entity until it itself is shining light, right? So that's why I think it's so funny that we think it's selfish to practice self-love, when in fact, all the greatest acts of service that you could ever provide to any human being would have to come from a foundation of self-love for them to have any real meaning or depth. Does that make any sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. We'll keep working on that, though.
Well, because it's so deep.
Helpful.
And everything is always pointing us to forget that. Again and again and again, we forget that, it's so fundamental.
Do you mind if I chime in too?
Please do.
So what I'm seeing is that there's this generosity of giving that you can have, that you can create this generosity of giving. And really, if you're giving out of a compassionate place within you and not out of obligation, that in itself is an act of self-love. If you're giving out of obligation, you're pouring from an empty cup. But if you're giving out of compassion, out of the desire to enhance the well-being of others, which is one of the most wonderful things that we can do as human beings, is to give in a way that serves life. It is so enriching. It is so wonderful, and it gives back to us tenfold. And that's kind of what I'm talking about when I mean by serving from the saucer. When you have a teacup and you are serving other people from your teacup, you're emptying your own cup. But if you serve from the overflow, you serve from the saucer that's underneath the teacup that's flown over with all of your self-love, that is powerful. And what I think that really takes is a depth of receiving, a generosity of receiving, actually, which is very challenging because we're not used to doing that. We're used to shying away and saying, "Oh, it's nothing, it's not a problem. No, no, no worries. It wasn't even me," or out of fear that it would make our egos puff up and be like, "Yes, it was me. I saved you. You're welcome." Ha ha. But instead of doing that, I think if we're generous in our receiving and we're showing people that it really is coming from the light within us, we're receiving their light and we're giving of our light. That is a powerful way to live.
I'm really absorbing that, Rich, because that is gorgeous. A generosity of receiving. It seems like that is a place of such immense self-love. And yet, it's paradoxical because again, it could be interpreted from the outside, that could look like somebody who wants stuff for themselves, and yet it's so not true. And this is why this is such a magical discussion. It's such an incredible inquiry because it is slippery and multi-layered. But I feel like I really deeply identify. I think I struggled my whole life with being generous in my receiving. I actually didn't know how to receive. So that really rings true to me.
See, your mother didn't teach you very well, I'm afraid. I need to understand better what you mean when you say depth of receiving. I think you use those words, Rich. Could you talk about that?
I'll try and do my best because I don't think that the words could encapsulate the idea that's behind it. But I'll try and add words to see if these might strike an understanding in you. It's like if a stone skips off the surface of a water. Skips off the surface of water. That's kind of how we receive a lot of things, where we let it skip off the surface of us. We don't take it in. We don't receive it deeply at all. And
what's that word? Don't receive it what?
We don't receive it deeply at all.
Oh, deep.
Yeah, it'd be like if instead of letting the stone skip off the surface, we let a stone sink to the bottom of our presence. And that, I think, cultivates gratitude, really. When you allow something in, you're going to cultivate some gratitude. And it's that gratitude that wells up in you that shows you that you're receiving it powerfully and deeply.
Do you think it's fair to say that the depth to which this stone sinks into your presence is almost directly correlated with the extent to which you love yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, and a part of that is vulnerability. It is because it skips off the surface because we've armored up. We've created maybe even like a layer of ice over the surface of the water. I'm diving too deeply into this metaphor, but we've frozen ourselves so that nothing can get in. And so there is some vulnerability that's necessary to be able to let something sink in. And that vulnerability is an act of self-love.
It's so profound because it goes back to what you were saying about releasing not just everybody, but yourself.
Yeah.
That creates the space for the kind of vulnerability you're talking about and the kind of gratitude you're talking about.
And we'll open it up for the rest of the session. Oh, here. If it's okay, I'll mute you. There we go. We'll open up for the rest of the session more opportunities to share and connect. I'd love to go to the chat. I'm seeing something that John wrote. And John, I'd love to invite you to come in and talk about it too, if you're open to that. I'm going to read it first. He said, I think as a child of 6, I formulated the idea that who I am is bad, flawed, and unacceptable. That I then proceeded to live out my life either to hide that fact, which I love that you put that fact in quotation marks. That's perfect. From others, or correct it through accomplishment and accolades. Absolutely. I suspect my experience is, though perhaps not perhaps extreme, not unique. Would you like to come in and share more about that experience? Because I think we do share that, and if you're willing to, it would be of value to us. Oh, that's okay. You don't have to. I would like to, please. This is a space of generous giving and receiving. So if you want to give, and we give when we share, we really do. If you want to give, that's great. If you don't want to give, that's totally fine. So I would like to talk about this though with you, Scott.
Yeah.
I think you would be a really great one to talk about this. What would you say to that statement?
Well, I relate very, very, very deeply. And I guess what I would say is that I think it's important for me to disclose that I was extremely resistant to self-love most of my life. And I definitely believed that I was flawed and unacceptable. And I guess even parts of me would say, yes, bad. I think there was always a part of me that knew I wasn't bad, but there was also a part that believed that because I received a lot of criticism as a child. So I, at some parts of me knew the criticism was false, but other parts sort of bought into them. And so I carried that around for 40 plus years, for sure. And definitely was trying to do a lot of hiding of that fact by, through my accomplishments. So I very, very much relate to this statement. And I think that I feel sure that it's not an unusual path for a lot of people. And what's changed for me is recognizing where I think there's so much power in stating it like that is that it presents an opportunity, an amazing opportunity, because for me, my self-love journey got supercharged when I was able to recognize that all that stuff in the past that made me resistant to it was the most amazing gift ever. were it not for all those experiences, I would have never been so open to the journey that I'm in now with self-love. I would have never been as receptive. I would never be able to hear the kinds of things that you said, Rich. I wouldn't have been able to hear them. They wouldn't have landed for me at all. And now they land so, so deeply. And that's all because of what had happened to me that set the stage. So I guess the big thing that I want to say is that asserting what John has asserted is probably the most beautiful thing you could possibly do, because it opens the door for your self-love inquiry in a way that nothing else could possibly do.
Hmm. Yeah, I hope that's really powerful to see it in that way, and to see that it's an invitation. It's a crack in the door.
Right. And it means that we all have so much hope.
Yeah.
Because the truth of it is, while the journey of existence as a human being is immensely difficult, the opportunities that we all have to expand our consciousness, to grow, are unlimited. And I will go so far as to say that self-love is the portal that gets us to higher levels of consciousness in a way that nothing else is.
So I feel like I hear you saying that challenges and difficulties, when you regard them as a gift, then it allows you to feel gratitude in all circumstances, and maybe allowing and training yourself to experience so much gratitude in all circumstances, even difficult ones. That's maybe in the ultimate way of expressing self-love.
Yeah, yeah, yes, I believe that's true. And I think that it's so interesting because this is the genius of this funny design that's baked into us, of having an ego and having relentless thoughts and having you know, the kind of consciousness that we have, all these things that are baked into the human experience that create so much suffering and so many challenges, and just exactly what John said. That is the normal human progression, honestly. And and it's baked into us. And we could just stop right there and say, oh, it's so hard to be a human. Oh, God, it's nuts. We suffer so much. It's awful. But what's so beautiful about the self-love inquiry is it allows us to go to the next step. And I think that's what you were saying, Marjorie, about gratitude, is that when we get to that step of gratitude, then we see it was not all for naught. It was not a curse. All that stuff was a blessing, because it got us to this place of understanding where we have so much opportunity now before us.
So perhaps in a way, there's an ultimate divine being that gives us experiences that if we learn to see the good and the gratitude and experience it with thankfulness as a lesson, that gives us an opportunity to sort of level up. And we wouldn't be given something that we couldn't handle. Is it that what you're saying?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's an incredible opportunity to level up. That's a beautiful way to put it.
I might add something if that's all right. I think that we sometimes go through our lives and this seems like a really nice idea. Oh, I could be grateful for every single thing that happens to me, you know? Oh, taxes? Yeah, great, thank you. You know, oh, a car wreck? Oh, yeah, great, thank you. Um, and in the moment, there's a lot of gnashing of teeth. At least in my experience. There's a lot of deep feelings of pain and challenge. And that is very real and visceral. That is a real experience. The experience of it is real, but it is created through us. It is not our experience. And oftentimes it's when we reflect, when we can wake up to it. And sometimes we can do that more quickly than other times. And the more that we explore this self-love thing, I feel like we can wake up more quickly and we can realize the gift in it. We don't always see that in the moment, but it's a great thing to look for. It's a grace. Like one of our teachers that we like to follow calls it a dark grace when we're in it. When it's like that dark night of the soul, it's like dark means you can't see. Like you literally just can't see anything around you. You don't know where to go. You feel stuck. You are lost. And it is an experience of grace. And oftentimes it's those challenges that wake us up even more fully than the light grace, the insights, the realizations. We sometimes don't unwrap those gifts, the gifts of the universe, until later. John, he said another comment. Is it okay if I read it? I'd like to read it. You can let me know. Yeah, okay. It seems to me tonight that we either define ourselves as worthy of love or not, and tend to look at others as worthy of love or not correspondingly, typically before the age of, say, 7 or 8. So the question is, how do we correct this perception? I might have something to that. Could I kind of continue on?
Please do.
Worthiness is an idea that we've co-opted. We borrowed it from culture. It's a thought. And there is a very big cultural idea of worthiness and worth and especially of unworthiness. Really, we're built in this society for the last 8,000 years where it's like you aren't worthy because of different institutions, because of our culture. There is a cultural idea of unworthiness. And then there is this idea that's passed down from our family of unworthiness. And so there's this deep-seated unworthiness that is at the root of kind of our experience of life, of how we learn to navigate in this world. We learn to have discernment, have judgment, to have good, bad, right, wrong. And it's in that thinking where there's worthiness and unworthiness. But it's an idea. Steve Chandler says that you can't go to like an unworthiness center and check your worthiness and see, oh, I'm sorry, your worth is at a 7 out of 10. You're pretty good, but your kids are really not worthy. They're only at a 2. There's not. It's not like that. It's made up. It's completely subjective. And if we really tune into the subjective nature of worth and worthiness, we will start to see that there's something that's underneath it. There is a good that's beyond good and bad, right and wrong. And that is who we are. And we can find that through self-love. You can't go to the store and buy worthiness. People have tried.
Yeah, and this really speaks to, I believe, why I think that's why having 10 sessions makes so much sense for our self-love expedition, because we need to be really, really gentle as we move towards self-love. It's not an on-off switch to practice self-love. We have so little practice doing it, and so little cultural guidance, and so few people oriented towards it, that it's a learning curve. So if the first few times that we turn towards it and it doesn't produce the results we thought it would, that's when we really need that grace to say, that's okay. It's okay. It's something that requires, multiple rounds, let's put it that way. When something tests you in those moments, and you might know intellectually that it would be a good idea to treat yourself nicely and not engage in mean thoughts, you might know that intellectually. You might be very, very, very clear that it's not a good idea to beat yourself up in that moment. But it still might be very hard to emotionally have that kind of control, which is why we need to be so gentle and just remind ourselves that's okay. It's totally okay if on that particular test that was thrown at us, we didn't land on it. We didn't quite find self-love that time. That's okay. Just to even have the awareness that that was an objective, that's a huge movement right there. Huge. And that's why I'm just such a believer in being super gentle with ourselves as we start this process of committing to self-love. And then one day, something will pop up that normally would have reproduced a response that might not have, you might have had a mean thought, or you might have been self-critical, you might have felt unworthy. And all of a sudden, this time, you catch yourself in the moment. And you are actually able to be loving with yourself. Just one time is all it takes. Now you have that as a frame of reference moving forward. It's huge. So that's why I really want to emphasize this gentleness thing. We don't have to see results immediately. as long as we have the intention of exploring.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that there's a value in the power of choice with this, which is a commitment. It's not choosing once and then being done with it. Oh, I'm going to choose self-love and I am forever loving to myself. It is a recommitment to yourself every single day, even moment by moment. And there's a power in that. So if there's a power in choosing once and then continually doing your best to continue to choose it day after day. And I love that it's such a beautiful exploration. We're calling this the self-love expedition. So thank you for joining us on our maiden voyage. We're going to do this again, and we'd love to invite you to come back and dip in the well of self-love, because it's a great place to come from. And the next time that we're going to be meeting, we have a guest speaker. Every other time we're going to try and have a guest speaker. His name is Michael McDonald, and he would love to talk to us about loving yourself as you are. He says, I love self-love, and as an exploration, it has so many flavors and angles and meanings. The direction I'd like to explore is to step away from self-love as a doing to self-love as a way of being. For many, self-love is a tactic, a practice, something to counteract when you're feeling down or trapped in self-judgment. But what about self-love as a place to come from? So I'd like to explore self-love as loving yourself as you are, no matter what. Not just when you're down or when you're up, but always. Loving yourself as a companion to having a human experience. Loving yourself as loving what is. So you can catch these on the replays. There's a website that Scott has. Let's put it in the chat as we finish up, so that you can visit that as a resource. We're going to be uploading the recording there. There's also 2 previous podcasts if you haven't listened to those. There's 2 blog posts that are really wonderful. One was written by Scott and yours truly, and we're putting them as a resource for you so that you can orient yourself in a way that is powerful and connected to who you really are. Thank you for joining us today, too. Let's put the website in the chat. And there's the next time we're meeting, I'll also put that one so that you can.
You need to unlock your iPhone first.
Well, that was fun. Yeah, we'll be meeting on June 13th. Here we go. And if you would like more support, Scott and I are creating a way to support you as well through one-on-one coaching. So if you're interested in that, I invite you to reach out to us as well. Cool. Well, again, I wish to express my gratitude. When you showed up today, it made me feel so delighted because it meets my needs to spread this awareness of self-love, to share the life energy within me so that you can see it within yourself too. I invite everybody to unmute yourself and to say goodbye, and thank you again for coming.
Thank you so much, Rich and Scott, for leading this important group.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure.